Marcey, can you tell us what this film is about, and as well as who it's directed, written, and starring?
Yes, I can certainly do that. Wake In Fright was directed by Ted Kotcheff on a screenplay by Evan Jones based on the Kenneth Cooke novel with some uncredited writes or rewrites by Ted Kotcheff. It stars Gary Bond as John Grant, Donald Pleasance as Doc Tyden, Chips Rafferty as Jock Crawford, Sylvia Kay as Jeanette Hines, Jack Thompson as Dick and Peter Whittle as Joe, and Al Thomas as Tim Hines. And from IMDb, after a bad gambling bet, a schoolteacher is marooned in a small town full of crazy, drunk, violent men who threaten to make him just as crazy, drunk, and violent.
Indeed, I think that pretty much the plot summary does a good job at summing up the film. But I guess for me, and I think you would agree with me as well, I think I first heard about Wake In Fright was from the documentary Not Quite Hollywood.
Yes.
Because at the time, I believe, because the film was going through its process of being restored.
Yes, because it was a bit of a lost film for many years.
Yeah, because when the film premiered at the 1971 Cannes Film Festival, it achieved a massive critical success. However, though, when the film actually finally came to Australia, it had much more of a mixed response, especially, even though, it got really good reviews, but audiences did not like the film at all, and they felt like this film just made Australians look bad.
Yeah.
And so basically it sort of played here and there throughout the years, but then it kind of basically wasn't really seen that much afterwards, to the point where people thought now that it's considered a lost film.
Yeah.
However, with the help of a few sort of fans of the film, about at least in the late 90s, early 2000s, some reels of the film were found. And so they painstakingly went and to restore the film. And of course, the restoration finally came out in 2009, where it was reshown again at the Cannes Film Festival as sort of a special screening event, hosted by one of the film's biggest fans, was Martin Scorsese.
Yes.
And of course, now in the 12 years since it's, officially re-released, the film has garnered even more critical acclaim and is now regarded as probably one of the great Australian films of all time. But before we dive into it, more into it, but Marcey, what did you think of Wake In Fright?
Well, I actually didn't see Wake In Fright as soon as I saw Not Quite Hollywood for some reason. I did not go out and watch it straight away. I actually watched it maybe 2-ish years ago, after we came up with the idea for this podcast, and you showed me the film.
Yep.
And I watched it with you, and I think I was left speechless just about with the film, just how, I guess, what's the right word? It's hard to think of the right words to describe this movie, but it is a shocking film. It is a film that you can almost smell, and it makes you feel so hot and dry. It really just gives you that feeling that you're in the outback, but also just one man's almost journey into the brink of madness and back. So I was very stunned and floored, and I definitely knew that doing this podcast was a good idea, but not all the films are going to be as good as Wake In Fright.
Indeed. But I guess for myself, I think when the movie actually did come out, they released it down at my local video shop, and I was living back in Cobar at the time, this small country town I was living in. So I was like, as soon as it was there, I was like, oh, saw it in Not Quite Hollywood, and I was kind of like starting to get into Ozploitation films, so I thought, I'll check this film out. And like you, I was just completely stunned by this film on my first watch. And it's very rare for me to actually say it, but after that first watch, I just knew that this film was an all-timer. One of the all-time great movies I have ever seen. It's very rare that I actually say that. And the more times that I've seen this movie since, it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher as one of my all-time favorite films. Like, it's at the moment, it's number 2. And to me, it's just an amazing achievement. And the fact that this is a film that, you know, at the time it was released, it had such a controversy behind it, a mixed reception. But the fact is, what I love about it is just how uncompromising of a film it is.
Yeah, it really is. And it does show a lot of brutal truths and reality and stuff that can still be quite relevant today. But specifically if you have grown up in small country, rural town Australia, because it can be very isolating out there because you're not very close to other towns, but it's got that vibe where everyone knows everyone. You can spot the outsider, and there's that repetitive nature about it, about life in that town. And I guess we can relate to that a lot more because we spent a lot of last year in lockdown, so we felt isolated, and it probably wasn't the best movie to watch in lockdown, but there we go.
Yeah, well, you're right, though, because I think it is one of those films that even though this came out 50 years ago, it still feels very timely. Like, it feels like it could easily be set today. And I think growing up in a small country town for about nearly 30 years of my life, watching this film, even though this film was directed by a Canadian, written by a British screenwriter, they did such a phenomenal job at capturing what Australian life was like. Not just them, but even elements while I was watching in this scene, all the scenes where John Grant is in Papandrea, like a lot of those scenes, like his interactions with the people, like what the people do in this town, like to me just was like so on point in what country life is like. And having grown up in a small town, this film really reflected that extremely well. Like the way, you know, like how you said, how people are like in small towns are so welcoming for other people, and the sort of the mundane feeling of it, and people kind of like, since there's not much to do, you have to kind of create your own type of entertainment, and the drinking sort of culture as well, and also sort of the sort of toxicity in some areas, particularly with toxic masculinity. So there's definitely a lot of those things in this film that Ted Kotcheff and Evan Jones just really captured extremely well, and it's just so believable. And even like I said, even though this film is set in 1971, I still see stuff like this even today every time I go back home and visit family. Like, it's still like mirrors true.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And I wasn't, raised or born in a small country town, but I have visited small country towns, and you can definitely see what they're like, and you get the feel of it is pretty spot on with how it's portrayed in the film. And what I find interesting about this film, and we will talk about this with the book, that we have this, like, the main character of John Grant in the film is British.
Yeah.
And he's out in Tibunda?
Yeah, Tibunda, yeah.
Tibunda. He's got his teaching position that he doesn't want to be doing because he wants to be working back in Sydney. And it provides us with that ultimate outsider look because he isn't Australian.
Yeah.
And he is very much that fish out of water, especially in regards to him being in Tibunda for his teaching position, but when he makes the stopover in Bundan-Yabba, or as they call it, the Yabba, the greatest city or town on earth, as they always say in the movie, he really does feel like he's not just a city person in the country. He is a foreigner in this country environment. And I think that has a really big impact in regards